Welcome to Poland Daily History with me, Nicholas Richardson. And in this episode, we're continuing our examination of the Ukrainian People's Republic, which emerged from the Russian Revolution and from the end of the First World War. And I'm delighted to have with me in the studio my colleague Adam Starzyński to continue the story. Adam, welcome back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back.
And I think we might start this section by looking at the impact of the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, which of course was a treaty between it wasn't yet Soviet Russia, between Russia and the Germans, which sort of took Russia out of the First World War.
Yes, in the previous episodes we started discussing the establishment of the Ukrainian People's Republic in 1917, the year which saw two revolutions in Russia, the one in February which toppled the Tsar, but put in place a provisional government instead, which was in turn toppled by the second revolution by the Bolsheviks in October. These two revolutions paved the way for an independent Ukraine to be born. Initially, after the first revolution in February, they were quite cautious and they chose for autonomy as the provisional government in St. Petersburg still had a lot of power. They had an army at their disposal, and they were afraid that they would simply get crushed if they went straight for independence. But following the second revolution, the Ukrainian People's Republic now decided that they were actually a republic, declared their independence as they could not accept the Bolshevik takeover of power. They objected that it was not something that had been anchored with the rest of the people that had been participating in the February Revolution, meaning all these other left-leaning political parties, from the social revolutionaries to the Borotbis, many different groups. So they said that we might still discuss some form of federation or union with Russia in the future. We will discuss it when there will be a government in power in Moscow. But now with the Bolsheviks, they also pointed to the fact that there was a power vacuum, as immediately after the October Revolution, the white movement was created and the start of the Civil War ensued. So they claimed that it was unsure who was actually in power in Moscow, since the communists were moving the seat of power, the capital city, from St. Petersburg to Moscow. But they saw that this was the excuse they had to declare full independence and start ruling themselves. So 1917 had been a very chaotic year, but 1918 would turn out to be not much different, if not even more chaotic. It started off with an invasion by the Bolshevik forces, the Red Army. They were trying to foment a revolution in Ukraine, in Kiev. They wanted the same form of Soviet councils being established, and they wanted them to adhere to the Bolshevik party in Moscow. But it turned out that even though there were Soviet councils created, there was not a Bolshevik majority in them. On the other hand, there was never a Bolshevik majority in the Soviet councils in Russia either. Even though the word Bolshevik comes from the Russian word for majority, they wanted to pretend that they were the majority. However, it was actually the Mensheviks, a different fraction,
exactly,
that were the majority. But so you could say that Soviet Russia started out built on a lie. So it was nothing that changed in the coming decades.
And when we look, nothing has changed even today, alas.
No, history, if it doesn't repeat, then it certainly rhymes.
Exactly.
That's for sure. But once they were in power after the revolution, they did send the Red Army to Ukraine. They took control of Kharkiv, the second largest city of Ukraine, and established their government there, making it the capital city of all of Ukraine that they claimed. There was a battle that was quite decisive in January, on January 30th, the Battle of Krute, a little bit north of northeast of Kiev, in which the Ukrainians only managed to muster 400 people, of which nearly 300 were young students. The Ukrainian People's Republic had not established an army while they were still pledging some form of allegiance to the provisional government in St. Petersburg. And that turned out to be a major mistake, one that their future leader, Semyon Petlura, had warned about as well. So they lost that battle, and a few days later, in February, on February 8th, the Red Army took Kiev. However, on the same date, there was also a breakthrough in the negotiations between the Central Powers, meaning the Germans and Austro-Hungarians, with the Bolsheviks that were now in power in Russia. They had wanted to withdraw from the First World War because technically they had not done it yet, and that was one of the main reasons for why the revolution had broken out, first in February in 1917 and then again in October. The one in October wasn't maybe caused by the war, it was rather the one in February that was built on the negative feelings that both soldiers and the peasants of Russia had toward continued participation in the war. This meat grinder that had killed so many of them on the Eastern Front. Maybe another parallel to what might be coming in the future in Russia today. But the one in October was also technically used by the Bolsheviks, as they claimed that, look, in February there was a revolution, the provisional government claimed that they would take us out of the war, and yet they have continued the war. So they justified their revolution in one way by pointing to the war again, but they themselves were then unable for a couple of months to withdraw from the war, and there were still Russian soldiers dying on the front lines. So they really wanted to reach an agreement with the Germans, which they did, and with the Brest-Litovsk Treaty signed, they had to withdraw from Ukraine. In reality, it turned out that they were still stalling. They didn't want to give up what they had taken in eastern Ukraine. They were hoping that maybe they could get away with keeping parts of Ukraine. So in April, the Germans had to launch, together with the Austro-Hungarians, had to launch a final offensive against the Russians in the First World War. They managed to free Kharkiv and all other regions of what is today Ukraine. The Bolsheviks and the Red Army withdrew, and in the meantime, the Ukrainian People's Republic, they signed an agreement with the Central Powers, which was mostly concerned about food shipments because of the naval blockade that the Western allies had placed on the Central Powers. They were very close to the point of starvation, and they were generally lacking everything. So in Ukraine, they saw an opportunity to get natural resources, and more than anything, food. So another parallel to today's war in Ukraine, in which the grain exports play such an important role.
Adam, I'm sorry, I'm just going to have to stop you there. As usual, the clock has defeated us, but we will pick up the story next time. There we are. I've had to interrupt Adam almost in mid-sentence, not quite. But don't worry, if you join us next time on Poland Daily History, as we hope you will, we'll pick up the story. Until then, thank you for watching, and see you again on Poland Daily History.